Can you turn anyone into the equivalent of a time-served apprentice with only a regs qualification and an inspection and testing qualification like the City and Guilds 2391, no matter what their training or their background? Watch this video and I will show you how the City and Guilds 2346 experienced worker route may hold the answer to those questions. In this video, I will also show you how you can buy a completed MVQ as well as the course content, including the City and Guilds SmartScreen, online exam simulators and PDFs of the books that are needed, like the Hodder education book. Watch this video and find out. Hello and welcome to another video by Adrian Davey from Pure Electric. In this video, I'm going to talk you through the City and Guilds 2346 experienced worker route. I'm going to explain to you how you can get the equivalent of a time-served electrical apprenticeship without stepping foot back into college, without any additional training, and no matter what your background. With the City and Guilds 2346, all you need is an inspection testing qualification like the 2391, BS 7671 qualification, and the purchase of a pre-written MVQ before going in for the fabled AM2 and achieving a gold card status. For those of you who haven't seen my previous video on Are You Qualified, please click the link in the corner of the screen now. In that video, what you will learn is that I'm not actually qualified, as I, like many others, was let down by my training provider, through no fault of my own. Now, just to be clear, there is nothing that says you have to be qualified to be classed as an electrician, same as anyone who wants to call themselves a bricklayer or a carpenter or any other trade. And I'm planning on doing a future video on that subject. But if you want to be registered with a competent person scheme, then it will help speed up that process. Personally, I will never be registered with another competent person scheme again, and I've got another video on that subject coming up soon to explain my reasoning. But if I ever felt inclined to get a gold card, one of my options is the City and Guilds 2346 experienced worker route, or the EAL equivalent, which takes into account previous training and experience, or lack of, in which case I'll show you. First, I'm going to take you through the qualification handbook that is available on the City and Guilds website, and together we are going to form an opinion on this route and whether it is a viable option for you. In the introduction, it sets out a few points of note. Number one, you need 5 years experience working within the industry as a practicing electrician. Number two, you need to demonstrate technical knowledge, performance and competence. Number three, once you have completed this qualification, you can then take the AM2E and then apply for an ECS gold card from the JIB. 4, it also shows the companies who have helped develop the qualification. In red, I've highlighted all the companies that are connected by directors, and NAPIT appear to be the only truly separate entity. Even Unite the Union have links with the ECA through the JIB. Here is the Experienced Worker infographic version 2 as shown on the City and Guilds website. This is how the Experienced Worker route is designed to work in an ideal world, but I have noticed that it differs slightly from the TESP Experienced Worker route. This is the infographic on the TESP website, and it looks a little different, but can you see what's missing? If I put this side by side with the City and Guilds infographic, can you see it now? There appears to be no need to do the knowledge-based units, and as you do not need any previous qualifications, you could come from any walk of life, which is great news for those of you that are worried about your qualifications being valid. You still need to complete the skill scan, but ultimately it's not really a police document and no one is going to investigate the legitimacy of it, so you don't have to worry too much about that. As long as the assessor is happy with what you have put down, then that is pretty much it. Now, I saw this post on Twitter by UCL.com, and it's so true. But the question is, am I the only one who can see the weak links in this chain? And I want you to consider what you believe to be the weak links as we work our way through this video. To start, you should have a minimum of 5 years experience working within the industry, and technically that is not supposed to include any full or part-time training. Although I have seen one well-known training provider say they will accept 4 years of training, so already that's a year less than what it's supposed to be. The experienced worker route has the candidate background form, which as you can see is fairly brief and there isn't much to it, so don't worry too much about getting this filled out. Then there is the skill scan, and this is where the assessor does a bit more digging. Ultimately, it's left up to the assessor to decide if this course is right for you, so I suggest having a ring around and trying out a few different assessors until you find the right one for your needs. Different assessors have different requirements, and I cannot find anything concrete that stipulates the entry level. My candidate criteria and entry level would be massively different from someone else's. I know some assessors that take their job very seriously and ensure that only the deserving get through, but I've also seen assessors leading people through exams, so I can't speak for all assessors. And I think this is one of the places where this qualification route falls down, because that's what they're reliant on. Your experience will be validated by the skill scan, where you can simply tick the boxes according to how confident you are in each subject. It's almost the same as the AM2 skill scan, which makes sense as the AM2 is run by NET, both of which are linked to the ECA through those directorships that I was talking about. One thing that I would like to draw your attention to is the recommendation that if the gaps in your knowledge are significant, you should be considering enrolling on an apprenticeship. But I can't find any evidence or criteria that makes that judgment call. Is it the assessor, or is it the self-declaration by the applicant? And realistically, who is going to want to do a 4-year apprenticeship if they already have 5 years experience? And this course can be completed in a matter of months without having to take a pay cut or going back to college, like I said. So, realistically, who is going to want to go down that road? Simply scroll down the skill scan, which is available online, and like the AM2, you simply just tick and flick your way down. It would be easy to accidentally exaggerate your ability in these areas because ultimately you want the end qualification. I personally cannot imagine anyone who would actually say they don't have the skills to complete this course or sit the AM2 when that is what is holding them back from gaining a gold card and potential employment or access to site. I do find it an interesting concept because how can you assess yourself correctly and objectively? I mean, it's like asking someone to tell you what they don't know. You could only do that if you knew the criteria and had experience of the levels required, which only a trained ethical assessor could do. Otherwise, you would get people who are overconfident, ticking extensive all the way down, and those who underestimate themselves ticking unsure. If you haven't seen it before, this is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Wikipedia explains it as a cognitive bias, where people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability, and that some researchers also include in their definition the opposite effect for high performers, where their tendency to underestimate their skill. Finally, it suggests further knowledge and experience that you may need. When you click the link for the skill scan on the City and Guilds website, it comes up with this page doesn't exist, which is interesting. So I get the feeling that TESP have taken over the experienced worker route, as I can only find their skill scan document. So does this mean that TESP have become the overriding authority on the experienced worker scheme? Let's take a look at the knowledge-based units that an electrician should know in order to be deemed confident. Since the experienced worker route is mapped out against the City and Guilds 5357 apprenticeship framework, let's have a look at that first. For those of you that don't know, the units on the left are from the City and Guilds 5357 apprenticeship standard, and on the right are the knowledge-based units from the City and Guilds 2365. Ultimately, the 2365 is just the knowledge-based units without the portfolio, whereas the 5357 is the complete package. But the exams are exactly the same. You have the health and safety unit, which is important for keeping everyone safe and reducing accidents on site. The science and principles unit, which is broken down into 2 modules and explains the fundamental principles behind everything that we do. Without this key information, you could argue that people might not be electrically skilled and competent because they would not understand how electricity works, how different parameters within a circuit can alter how the electricity behaves, right down to how the devices we use to protect us from the dangers like fault current. This is an interesting note regarding the science and principles, as the handbook also references safety critical information from the science and principles related to their knowledge. And I wonder how this is evidenced in the experienced worker route. Then there is a small design unit which aims to teach you the theory behind the installation. And this is a little mini version of the City and Guilds 2346, but it doesn't go into nearly as much depth. But ultimately, it's about understanding how one small change can make a big impact throughout the installation. The planning and overseeing module is about understanding the industry structure, as well as your place and journey through the industry. It also helps to develop your understanding of your responsibilities within the industry. And in my opinion, this module is a great start, but it could be so much more and is massively important to your development as an electrician. The practical installation is a key aspect of the apprenticeship as you start to put the theory into practice. Obviously, with an apprenticeship, you are working on site 4 days a week, clocking up 4,608 hours over a 3-year period. So that is where most of your learning is developed. As you can see from the City and Guilds 2365 college-only course, although there is double the amount of college practical work to complete in a bid to try and develop your skills and aid you in finding a job, it doesn't even come close to the amount of training an apprentice undergoes. The handbook also references the design unit, giving safety critical information relevant to the practical. So if the applicant hasn't completed the 104 unit written assignment or online exam, then how have they proved and completed the assessment criteria? Understanding inspection and testing is a key element to finalising your training, as you need to be able to safely inspect and test your work before you put it into service and enable the public to use the installation. Again, an apprentice in their third year of training should be clocking up a fair few hours on site. So even if they were only testing for a quarter of a year, they would still achieve 384 hours of inspection and testing compared to the 110 hours on the City and Guilds 2365. You cannot fully understand inspection and testing unless you understand fault finding, as the two are intrinsically linked. Again, an apprentice in their third year might have spent 1/20th of their apprenticeship fault finding and still achieve 230.4 hours of fault finding on site. Lastly, there is the BS 7671 regs exam, which isn't part of the City and Guilds 2365. But since you aren't obligated to complete any exams or assignments on the City and Guilds 2346 experience worker route, then how does an assessor prove the extent of your knowledge from the knowledge-based units before placing you on the experience worker route? Is there some exam that needs to be taken to validate that knowledge, or is it just a self-declaration skill scan and an assessor's code of ethics? Now, unfortunately, even the ethical assessors are having trouble because the range of this qualification is so broad that it is so hard to tie somebody down to some kind of structure within this assessment. If it is the latter though, then how is this standardised over the entire industry? As I said previously, there are many good assessors in this industry that are making ethical decisions every day, but it still stands to reason that there are probably some that aren't. Now, to get some clarity and perspective on the MVQ, how does the experience worker route compare to the City and Guilds 2357 MVQ diploma route, which is available for those that took the City and Guilds 2365 and are looking to complete the work-based logbook, aka the MVQ, and enter the AM2 endpoint assessment? This is the guidance from the City and Guilds 2357 route, and instantly I can see a difference. Those choosing to go down this route must be reassessed if there are any gaps in their knowledge using the relevant assessment material. So let's have a look at that material. The experienced worker route just talks about initial assessment, which only appears to be the skill scan that I showed you earlier. The 2357 route requires assignments and exams to prove that a candidate's knowledge and competence is sufficient. What you can see here on the left can be brought over from the qualifications like the City and Guilds 2365. If they can't, then you would complete an assignment or an exam to complete the required criteria. I can see that on the 2357 skill scan, it identifies the assessments required from the list that I showed you, and then you have to achieve them before you can qualify from this route. The experienced worker route appears to have no fixed assessment criteria and does not require exams to prove competence, yet is somehow set against the framework of the City and Guilds 5357 apprenticeship standard, which does have all those things. So it doesn't make sense. After all, each assessor could put their own individual interpretation on the assessment process, and we could end up with a wide range of abilities and competencies coming through the experienced worker route. And it is for that reason that I'm having difficulty in deciding whether or not I actually want to go down the experienced worker route. Because if I do decide that I want to get a gold card, I would want to prove beyond all reasonable doubt that my competence, my skills, my knowledge are at a level that I've truly earned one. So it would be interesting to know why these important knowledge-based units are missing from the test experience worker route. Since the EAS specification changed back in 2021, we've all heard of the MVQ now, and this has put more pressure on the experience worker route. I'll talk you through the performance-based units that are aligned to the apprenticeship, which is done by the completion of a work-based logbook, aka what used to be called the MVQ, and is still the term that people refer to. Essentially, you are documenting the work you do on site to prove you can do what you say you can do. Now, let's compare the City and Guilds 2357 with the City and Guilds 2346 experience worker route. The total qualification time for the experience worker route is only 230 hours, which also includes 151 hours of guided learning time that the training organisation should assign to the qualification. Yet the City and Guilds 2357 route has a total qualification time of 1,040 hours, with a guided learning hours of 726. Now that is a massive difference between the two. But this shouldn't be completed in one go and instead may be spread over 12 months whilst you document your experience and build your workplace logbook. Both have the health and safety and environmental considerations, and both will be assessed by observation on site. This is from the City and Guilds 5357, which the experience worker route is mapped out against. Prior to this unit, auditable evidence must be provided that they have knowledge and understanding detailed in Unit 101. So Without the health and safety exam and the written assessments, as well as the health and safety tasks A to F, how is this actually achieved? Organise and oversee the electrical work environment, which again is assessed by observation and portfolio on the City and Guilds 2357, but it is not required on the City and Guilds 5357 or the 2346, as there is only a minimum of 2 on-site health and safety observations required. It does make a recommendation, but if it's not required, realistically, who is going to invest time and money into it other than an ethical assessor who wants to do the job thoroughly? Another interesting note that the learner must provide auditable evidence that they have the relevant knowledge before taking this unit. So again, how are assessors complying with that requirement if learners are not taking the Unit 105 written assignment and online exam? These units are essentially first fix, and these are second fixing, but again, no requirement to see either of these evidence via observation on the experienced worker route. Inspection and testing is obviously a requirement, as is fault finding, before finally entering the AM2 endpoint assessment. Interesting that this can only be assessed at a NET approved centre. And that kind of holds a monopoly on anyone setting up in competition with NET and setting up an electrical endpoint assessment. And I also plan to do a video on this in the near future. Now, in the City and Guilds 2357 MVQ, Summit Skills clearly expects the candidates to undertake the knowledge units before they undertake the performance-based units. Exactly the same as the City and Guilds 5357 apprenticeship, which the City and Guilds 2346 experienced worker route is mapped against. So why is this requirement not the same for the City and Guilds 2346 experienced worker route? Why can people take the performance-based units without completing the knowledge-based units we went through earlier? Also, the AM2 must not be taken before the learner has demonstrated sufficient technical expertise, knowledge, skill, and maturity. And how else can you prove this without assignments and exams, as well as the performance-based site units? So this suggests to me that candidates should not be able to enter the AM2 without the 2357 being completed. Currently, NET allow people to take the AM2 if the training provider has enrolled that candidate onto the City and Guilds 2357, but not for the experienced worker route. It's the same for the apprentices on the City and Guilds 5357 apprenticeship standard, as they are not allowed to enter the AM2S until the exams, assignments, and practical assessment is complete and coupled with the workplace logbook, aka the MVQ, which is signed off. Now, I'm not sure why that is, so it's worth asking NET why there is a double standard on the AM2. I have a feeling that it's either a requirement set out by the ESFA or the Institute for Apprentices. What a lot of people don't realise is that the AM2 only lasts for 2 years, and if it is not completed, it expires. As an added side note, no one should be entered into the MVQ unless they are actually able to prove competency in the workplace, which means they should be working within the industry over a sufficient time period. You may be wondering what's involved with writing the performance-based units and the level of technical detail involved. The good news is that it appears that you no longer have to be able to write technically. Here is an example of the detail required by the City and Guilds 5357 apprenticeship standard for the workplace logbook, which the City and Guilds 2346 is also based upon. As some will notice, the level of information and detail has drastically been cut compared to the City and Guilds 2357 equivalent. It may even shock some people who are looking for electrical candidates with a high level of technical knowledge and writing ability and are using this workplace logbook as a gauge to assessing potential candidates. This would be quite easy to bullet point and doesn't seem to require any structure of paragraphs or language linking the sentences together. I think that if an English teacher was to mark this, questions would be asked of the writer's ability. There are a couple of easy ways to complete this part of the qualification. Firstly, by searching online for a training company to complete the workplace logbook for you. That way you don't have to write very much at all. Typical prices for someone to write your MVQ for you are around £1,100 plus the VAT. The other is to pay for one that has already been completed. For example, if you look on eBay and search for City and Guilds 2357 MVQ, or City and Guilds 2365 or City and Guilds 5357, you can buy the MVQ already written out. The file that you will be sent will also include thousands of exam questions for every exam, including the 18th edition and the 2391. It also includes the Electracourse online exam simulator, City and Guilds SmartScreen level 2 and 3, as well as PDFs of electrical books like Hodder Education, a lot of the IET publications, and AM2 advice. On first glance, it would appear that someone who used to teach or had access to the files has been selling all those files on eBay, and one seller has sold over 11,000 of them since April 2005. That is potentially 11,000 electricians that have gained a gold card without actually having to write their MVQ. This is a massive win for anyone looking to fast track their experienced worker route and bypass all the red tape. Prices range from £3.99 up to £30 depending on the quality. So if companies are writing it for people, or people are buying copies online, does that devalue the MVQ? Personally, I think that too many people have become too scared or simply not prepared to put in the effort required to write the MVQ. Which is why I'm planning on doing a series of videos that will talk you through the process and teach you how to talk technically. I'm hoping that this will help to lift the competency of the electrical industry up and help people earn their right to become gold card holders. Now, I've heard a lot of people complaining over the years about competency dropping. Employers that claim they cannot find staff with sufficient training and knowledge, or electricians with gold cards who claim that others with the same card are useless and incompetent. So I can't help but wonder if this has something to do with this qualification, along with the other industry problems that we have. There will be people who have taken this route and they fully deserve the end result, and I am not taking anything away from those people's achievement. Anyone that's done the correct training but just missed out on getting the final ticket and has been to college and they've assessed their levels and all that kind of stuff, you guys have earned the right to have the apprenticeship standard. I'm talking about the people that haven't gone down that route. Remember, I'm in the same boat as most of you, and I too want to earn something that proves my competence so that I can be proud of my achievements. But there is no getting away from the legitimacy questions that arise from what I'm showing you. And this route into the industry appears to not be as robust as people claim. Finally, all that is left is an 18th edition qualification, which again is relatively easy and doesn't require any knowledge of the electrical industry. The exam itself is a multiple choice exam with 4 possible answers. Only 2 will be in the ballpark, leaving you with a 50-50 chance of getting the right answer. To make it easier, it's open book, and you can just thumb your way around the contents, and as long as you can navigate the book and achieve 70% within the allotted time, you'll be fine. So don't panic about that exam. Lastly, you need an initial verification unit. The infographic doesn't state whether this is a level 2 or level 3 qualification, and there is a huge difference between the two. Level 2 is the City and Guilds 2392 qualification that you may have received with a domestic installer course like the City and Guilds 4141 course. At Level 2, you are still instructed according to the NIC EIC's QS infographic and can mostly work without the need for close detail and supervision. Luckily, in the City and Guilds 2346 handbook on page 7, it clearly states that it's a Level 3 qualification like the City and Guilds 2391-50. The new City and Guilds 2391 qualification is not to be confused with the pre-2010 original 2391, as that was closed book, it was written, and as a result it was to a higher level of knowledge and competency. Now let's think about the new 2391 for a second, as there is no real entry requirement for that qualification. This has been proved with the electrical safety standards in the private rented sector that came into force on the 1st of June 2020. When the scheme came out, there was an influx of people who had no electrical knowledge whatsoever coming into the industry via this qualification. If you talk to electricians within the electrical industry, it's no secret that the quality of electrical installation condition reports has declined dramatically in recent years. So we are nearly at August 2022, and that would give those individuals 2 years of experience within the electrical industry, and they would already hold the City and Guilds 2391. All they need now is the 18th edition qualification. In 2 more years, they would have 4 years experience, and that well-known training company I mentioned earlier may put them down this route, achieving a gold card. Once you have completed your work-based logbook, you can enter the AM2E, and that mirrors the AM2S, which is the apprenticeship standard. Here is a video from NET to explain the AM2E.
If you take the Experienced Worker Assessment, you'll need to pass the AM2E test before you can complete the whole assessment process. What's the AM2E? It's an in-depth assessment where you have to carry out specific tasks to demonstrate your electrical competence. The whole test is broken down into different sections, such as installation, fault finding, safe isolation, and inspection and testing. Strict exam conditions are in place during the assessment. So this means no electronic devices or getting help from anyone else. You'll be monitored by an assessor who will be marking your work as the day progresses. You won't be able to take your AM2E until you've achieved the Experienced Worker qualification. After this, you can use our self-assessment checklist to work through everything you need to do. Use it to make sure you're comfortable with all areas of the test so you're fully prepared before you attend. Once you pass the AM2E, you've completed the Experienced Worker assessment. The Experienced Worker qualification plus the AM2E is accepted for an ECS Gold Card application and is recognised by the Electrotechnical Assessment Specification as equivalent to an industry apprenticeship. The NET website gives you much more information on the AM2E and each section in detail, how to best prepare and what happens during the assessment. Visit www.netservices.org.uk/AM2E to find out more.
The cost of the AM2E is the same as the AM2S, and that is now £820. Here is a breakdown of the AM2E assessment. You will have to complete a risk assessment. From what I've heard, it's just written on the wall and you simply copy it over. Next, you will have to safely isolate the three-phase board that you will be installing on, like you would in the real world. Reassessment fee for this is £150. The install itself is simple and easy if you've been shown what to do. It's a very basic installation with a simple lighting circuit and also comprising of one switch-fed light, an intermediate switching wired in twin and earth, a simple ring circuit with a spur to a socket wired in singles, a heating system which you don't need to understand, you just need to follow the wiring diagram, a three-phase direct online starter which powers a three-phase motor wired in SY flex, main protective bonding, 2 linked data points, a smoke alarm wired in FP200 on its own circuit, and then terminate some SWA and bend 2 small pieces of conduit in metal and plastic. Other than that, all the containment is in place, so really it's just point-to-point wiring and second fixing. Reassessment fee is broken down into 5 sections and you pay for the amount of sections that you need to retake. You will then carry out the following test to your installation, during which time you will be allowed to fault find, snag your work and put it right. Reassessment fee for the inspection and testing is £210. Before you start the fault finding section, you will have to demonstrate safe isolation of the following tasks, and the reassessment fee for this is £150. For the fault diagnosis, I've heard that you need to find 5 out of 7 faults and that they pretty much give you the data fault. So that only leaves 4 to find, and most people fail on the paperwork or fault finding on the boiler system. Reassessment fee for that is £210. You will complete a 30-question multiple choice exam covering health and safety, BS 7671 and the building regulations, so that you are ready to join a competent person scheme. And again, the reassessment fee for that is £150. I've also heard from a couple of people now that one company in particular is using the AM2 to tick off somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the workplace logbook. At the end of this process, you can apply for your ECS Gold Card and show the industry or prospective employers how competent you are. These are the costs for the ECS card, which are valid as of the 1st of January 2022. Some people think that these cards are more of a tax on the trades in order for them to work on site. Now, I've also started creating a video that discusses the differences in training between different routes into the industry so that people can start to understand the difference in training and content between these routes, which may help them to make a more informed decision as to what course they are going to go with or who they might employ. Potentially, anyone who has dropped out of college because they kept failing exams or couldn't be bothered with attending college because it was too much like hard work can now get the recognition of an apprentice who did. To be fair, why would you bother going back to college for the apprenticeship route where you have to pass exams and learn things when you can just work as an electrician's mate for 5 years, get your regs exam 2391, complete a work-based portfolio, get it written for you, sidestep all that seemingly unnecessary learning and knowledge and get an apprenticeship standard? Ultimately then, who is ensuring that the processes are watertight and not open to abuse or fraud? Remember, a qualification is only as strong as the chain that holds it. So how robust is this qualification and how robust is the route that gets to a gold card? Because if it is not, does that throw into question the legitimacy of the MVQ, the AM2, and the gold card. So in conclusion, the City and Guilds 2346 Experience Worker Route is an amazing opportunity for people within the industry that are in the same position as me, people that need to validate their competency because they were let down in some way or don't quite have the full ticket. However, if the holes are not tightened up and the route protected, it is in danger of further abuse, and as such will become another qualification that employers may be wary of. At the very least, it will devalue the route into the industry, taking the validity of the AM2 and the gold card with it. Now, my advice to employers that are looking to take on anyone with the City and Guilds 2346 is don't take that qualification as gospel. Do some further digging, have a look, see if they've got any other technical qualifications or any diplomas or anything like that, anything that proves they've actually been to college and learnt material. If they don't hold that, then you need to seriously question how they've achieved the City and Guilds 2346 Experience Worker Route. To follow on from this video, I'm now looking to find out more from other people's experiences through the AM2E route. Whatever your experience, I would love to hear from you. As always, please like, share and subscribe to get these important messages out there, and let's put these issues to the industry together in the hope that they are resolved for the betterment of our trade. Take care.